Humanity Matters.
Hello, my name is Arnie Herz, and welcome to Habits of a Whole Heart on hmTv as part of the Humanity Matters series. After just completing 2 episodes with Dr. Orly Calderon from a psychological perspective of wholeness and healing, we decided to do a 3rd podcast episode to bring forth real-life examples in our respective lives and the lives of other people we know to really show how we can implement post-traumatic growth through a change of thinking, through development of coping mechanisms, and to really help foster healing within ourselves, between us and others, and within society. So thank you, Orly, for joining me for a 3rd episode here and a very practical application of the core principles that we discussed in the first 2 podcast episodes today.
Thank you for inviting me. I want to point out that post-traumatic growth is a very specific approach to psychology. In fact, my very dear friend and a colleague, Dr. Ronnie Berger from Adelphi University, along with another colleague, Dr. Tsipi Weiss, who used to be at Long Island University, have written multiple articles and at least 2 books about the topic. So post-traumatic growth is something very specific in terms of strategies. But I think that the connection to what we've talked about before is that post-traumatic growth, like reframing that we work on, or restructuring, or cognitive restructuring in CBT, is taking a moment or a chunk of time to reframe a negative experience that is happening to us, to understand it from a different perspective in order to help us grow from it. So PTG is one way to do that. Cognitive restructuring is another way to do that. But in general, we're talking about the ability to develop the ability to think differently about a negative experience, so that rather than the negative experience is bringing it down, we're able to use it as an opportunity to have a better life, to have a better perspective, to have a handle on what is going on in our lives.
So that's called cognitive reframing?
Cognitive restructuring, sometimes called reframing.
Cognitive restructuring. And how does that differ again from post-traumatic growth?
So in principle, they're similar in that what you do is you are rethinking the way that you're interpreting something negative that has happened to you. But post-traumatic growth involves all kinds of other strategies, and it's a field in its own right. Whereas cognitive restructuring is not necessarily addressing, cognitive restructuring can apply to trauma, but is not necessarily addressing trauma. Cognitive restructuring, CBT, were really developed by Aaron Beck in the late 60s, early 70s, as an answer or response intervention to depression and anxiety.
I see. So in a sense, both of them are forcing us a whole different rethinking pattern to reevaluate a particular situation that came up that could be negative and get us stuck in the rut that we talked about in the first episode. And this gives us the ability to constantly be in a process of growing and not being stuck. So let's delve into like real life example. I mean, is there a real life example in your life or someone else's life that you think of so we could really give our listeners an example of how this really works in real life?
Sure, not to make this about myself, but have had, like other people, negative experiences in my life, right? Loss of a significant other years ago, back in 2007, which was very sudden and very painful and really turned my life upside down. I'm not suggesting that by using cognitive restructuring, I'm minimizing the pain of what has happened. I'm suggesting that, and I'll describe in a second how I did that, I'm suggesting that it helped me deal better with the loss and move on with my life. So 2 things have helped me. One thing that is really 2. First of all, the support of my family, the support of my community, and the fact that I have children that need me, and therefore I need to get myself together and make sure that I'm there for them, right? And at the same time, their support for me. So we talked 2 episodes, I think, ago about the sense of community and the importance of community for support. That was one thing. The other thing is, I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll translate it because it doesn't sound right in English. In Hebrew, the word why, lama, is also what for, lema, for what purpose. And one of the things that I am trying to implement in my own life is to move away from the lama. Why did this happen to me? And move towards what is the purpose of this happening for me or to me? What can I do with it? And the way that I restructured or cognitively reframed the loss of that person, my significant other, was my role in life was to be there for him for those last years of his life. And he finished his role in life. And now I'm moving on. And it has happened to me so that I can learn from it and perhaps bring more strength, more insight to my next relationship, which thank God has happened 3 years later with my current husband, the best relationship I've ever had in my life, right? So, and I know that you can relate too to what it's like to have a new family, a new relationship, bringing in what you learned from the previous relationship to this relationship.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for that example.
Of course.
And so
I'm sure that you can relate to some of the things that you said that I'm saying. You went through illness yourself, serious illness, not that long ago, right?
Well, I as I'm thinking about this and rethinking it, I think I use these techniques without being aware that these were techniques. As you may know, many of my listeners may know from earlier podcast episodes, when I was 20, I had congestive heart failure playing a basketball game.
Actually,
An
did not know
intramural
that.
basketball game.
I did not know that.
And in the hospital, the doctors told me that I had blown a hole in my aortic heart valve.
Wow.
And that I was close to not making it in this world.
How scary.
And that was quite shocking. And when they told me this, playing sports was over. I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. Of course, I was never good, but it was only in my own head. But playing sports 5-6 hours a day was my entire outlet on life. I was very anxious. I was worried about what I was going to be in my life. And when that happened, I realized this is happening for a reason. And I took this opportunity to take control of my own life. And that's when I started studying yoga and meditation. Mm-hmm. And I began to try to understand what life was like, because I didn't know if I was going to be alive another 3 to 5 years. And they told me I would need open heart surgery, all very scary stuff at the age of 20. And so my life was turned upside down. But I chose to try to figure out what is it that I needed to learn in that situation. And
what helped you to make that choice? At 20 is a very young age to deal with such shocking news, right? What helped you? I mean, the experience I'm talking about happened to me, 18 years ago. So I was already an adult, right? I was an adult. I had, kids in college. I mean, at 20, we're not yet formed enough, most of us, to have that type of presence of mind and courage to face it the way that you're describing. What helped you to get to that state of mind?
I remember sitting in the hospital and the doctor telling me what was happening. And this inner voice said, this is the best thing that ever happened to you in your life. Because I felt so much pressure to go to law school or go to medical school. And at that stage in my life, what I really wanted was to just learn about myself and to discover the world. And in a sense, it gave me the freedom to be able to say to my family, I need to take a break. And that the burden of the world of having to be a certain way fell through, because the reality was I literally knew that life could be over in any minute. It was so shocking to confront my mortality at that age that I just gave myself the mental permission to explore into what I wanted to do with life. And sure enough, a year later, I graduated from the University of Michigan. I had developed a meditation practice, and my ability to meditate allowed me to control my pulse and my blood pressure, and all the heavy meds that I was on went off. My whole heart had stabilized. And I saw the value of that. And that's when I went off to India to study yoga and meditation full time for a number of years before I came back to go to law school 4 years later.
It's really incredible, because what you're describing is not only a way to heal yourself emotionally and mentally from this devastating news that you receive at such a young age as a young adult, but actually got you to feel powerful to control your destiny and actually translate it into actions, right? Being involved in this type of mindfulness and yoga, and actually controlling your bodily physical condition through that. This is exactly the issue of thinking, feeling, behaving. And look what change you have made. Most of us don't really believe that we can make such a change in our lives from a very dire circumstances, a health threat to where you are now. It's incredible. It's really incredible.
And I think what you had said earlier, thank you. I think it's a muscle. I think I've been fortunate. Like people often say, well, what have been some of the best things that's happened in your life? When I give programs, I ask people, what are the most transformative events in your life? And almost always 80% of what people share is something we would consider negative. A medical situation, a divorce, a breakdown of a business, all these things, but they're valuable because they help you develop that muscle.
Yeah.
If you are already in the pit, it just deepens the pit. But if you've learned how to stand up and you've developed that resilience and those coping mechanisms, it becomes a platform for growth. So fast forward, and the surgery that I was supposed to have in 3 to 5 years, because I was able to control my whole biomechanics, it wasn't until 33 years later.
That's amazing.
When I was 54 years old, which is 9 years ago, I saw my doctor and I knew I was not feeling well. I knew something was up. Doctor told me that my heart had expanded by 50% and that I would need to have effectively reconstructive heart surgery. And when I found out, the surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks later. It wasn't urgent, but I needed to do it within 6 months. Otherwise, I would only have a year to live. And I remember again with Suzanne, with my wife, of really framing, okay, this is the reality. How do we make the best of the situation? Yeah. And I started doing Pilates because I wouldn't be able to use my arms to get up because the chest bone would be broken and, it would be cut so what was within my control? And I really thought about my legacy, and I spent more time with the kids, and I started putting things into place that if this surgery was not successful and there was a risk, that I would feel a sense of wholeness and completion. And so in being empowered in that way. And I remember the whole recovery process of being empowered and how to bring myself forth. And then, the next big muscle on the medical front, as you know, was 3 years ago during the summer of 2022, sitting in my backyard on a very hot day out of absolutely nowhere, I started getting an excruciating headache. Mm-hmm. And it turns out I was having a very serious brain bleed, what's called the subarachnoid brain bleed, that was deep within the brain. I was rushed to the hospital. And the next day, while I was conscious, I heard the doctor say to my wife, it was a miracle that I was still alive, and there was only a 50% chance I would make it through the weekend. And this was shocking to us. And immediately, my wife and I realized this is happening for a reason. It was a choice that we made, and that we were here for a reason. And we immediately started rethinking our role. Instead of being a victim, what could we do to transform this situation? And I said, if this is going to be my last days on earth, I want to be positive. I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for the staff. And it ended up becoming such an incredibly meaningful, connected time. Every person who came to see me, I would be appreciative, grateful, funny for my kids, communicating nothing but love. And
what a profound experience you're describing. And I'm sure that at the same time, there was also fear. There was also, I'm sure on your wife's part, concern and sadness about the possibility of losing you. So it connects to what I was saying before. We're not saying something like this is happening, and just because we're able and we have the presence of mind and the courage to think about it in a positive way, it doesn't take away from the pain, the fear, the negative emotions. It just gives voice to something else that could channel those negative emotions in a way that's going to wind up being productive. I know that we talk a lot about positive, and very often when I work with people who went through painful experiences, I try not to use the word positive, because people who went through a painful experience and they're not quite at a stage like you're describing, it offends them to think that this is something positive. So I use the word productive instead. Because when somebody is not yet ready to look into the situation and realize that there is really an opportunity for growth, to turn their fear, their pain, their grief sometimes into something positive, it's just too much, and a person is going to shy away from it. But when we're talking about productive, something that's productive, that's going to help you to survive, that's going to help you to navigate that helps. But it sounds to me like what you're describing, particularly with this most recent health challenge, you were really thinking about it in a positive way, probably alongside some fears and regrets and concerns. I see your eyes are tearing up a little bit.
You're a great therapist. I think that this reframing, this is so profound right now, because, I said to Suzanne after, that was a lot of fun. It was like, we had a lot of fun. And then it was like months later, she says, I just want you to know.
It was not fun.
It was not fun. It was you were in an immense amount of pain, and it was a very difficult time. And it was 100% productive.
Yeah.
It was very, very productive. And I think that's such a better framing of it, because when I went back to visit our friend Jack Benjour in the same hospital, it was traumatic for me. I couldn't even stay there. I didn't realize how difficult it was in this environment. And so we really bonded with people, and we were productive, and I didn't let myself to feel victimized. But it was, I think, productive is the right thing. And still that pain, every time I get a headache or every time I feel a flutter in my heart, I think,
it's scary.
Okay, this could be it.
Yeah.
This could be it. And so every day I wake up and I say, how do I live today as though this is my last day, knowing that this could be my last day? And so that's productive, but it's also painful at the same time. And that's what I think that you're really helping me understand. The richness of life is not about the pain. It's about living with that and being resilient and having the coping mechanisms to make a positive impact. And it's so much more honest and so much more real.
Yeah, because I think that really the secret of a life that is meaningful to somebody is being able to integrate and recognize that, yes, life happens. There's all kinds of challenges that we're going to experience, but it doesn't have to bring us down. We can embrace the challenge. We can embrace the fact that we're sad or we're anxious or we're scared, and at the same time, grow from it. That's why experiences like this are so profound, because it's bringing a whole lot of emotions together, and it's sometimes difficult to contain those emotions because it's so complex. And that's why, people need help, either from their community, from their loved ones, or sometimes from a professional, in order to be able to process and contain this complexity of emotional state.
It's beautiful. So I just want to expand on this a little bit. So one of the things that Suzanne, one day I had my 15 minutes where I was able to walk around. That was only it. I was in bed 23 hours and 45 minutes a day. So I was able to walk 15 minutes, and I would always make a joke out of it that I was winning the race, where I was the only one who was walking. Everyone on the floor, unfortunately, was in a coma or had COVID. They were unable to leave the floor, and trying to keep the positivity. And one day I'm walking, the second day, and everyone's like, thanking me, thank you. And I had no idea what they were thanking me for. And it turns out that Suzanne realized that the cafeteria was still closed because we were still in the COVID era. And the nurses were working 13-hour shifts. And she felt bad for the nurses, and she wanted them to have some food. So every day she started ordering in food for the entire floor.
That's beautiful.
Of the staff, where they would have bagels and coffee and sandwiches. And people were so grateful.
That's beautiful.
And they were then in turn, of course, grateful for us. I thought, of course, it was a terrible idea because they'd want me to stay longer than I needed to be there. But seeing Suzanne give to the staff and the staff giving back to us,
that's incredible.
Was so meaningful. And then, as you know, the whole community came together for us in such a beautiful way. And this was very profound. And now...
Were you aware that the whole community was praying for you? Because we were all praying.
I was, but not fully until after. And Suzanne, who's a saint, she's unbelievable. When we saw our other community member, Eliza Cohn, who had cancer and was quite sick, Suzanne jumped into action to be on the other side. And helped organize meals and helped bring people together for the community. And she created the Eliza Cohn Chesed Fund that's now very active in the community, taking care of other people. And one of the many things that it's done is that she found out about this young man who you're now familiar with, whose name is Adam, who had to have a liver transplant, whose mother lived in Israel and they had no resources. And she provided resources for the mother to be able to visit every single day, rides, and a whole community coming together. And we start seeing this, paying it forward and impacting the community, and how this has brought the community together in such an incredible way.
It's interesting that you're bringing up this family, because what we did through the donations that we all made and the taking turns with the driving and providing the support, provided the mother, who was Israeli, as you said, and came here for a few months to be next to her son, provided her with a sense of community, because she was completely disconnected from her community at home, right? She also had a husband and children in Israel, relatively young children. And here she was all alone except for her connection to her son. So when we did that through this Chesed Fund that Suzanne has created, and those of us who got involved, we gave her a sense of community. And more than once, the mother had said to me that besides the practical instrumental help that we were able to provide, the fact that she felt supported by a community really is sustaining her. And that's really an incredible, powerful envelope that we can provide for each other in terms of supporting each other in a community.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I just want to add that, one thing we're involved with is that there's non-Jewish communities that are very much challenged today in the United States and beyond. And we're also involved in those communities to provide real support for people, food and
resources,
resources. And so this is also very much connecting to the broader community as well. And as you know, I'm very involved with a lot of the advocacy that we do through AJC, which is bridge building with between the Jewish community and the Muslim community, the Jewish community and the Catholic community, the Jewish community and the Black community. And we did some of the work with the Abraham Accords of showing that this is about building bridges among people who want to move society forward and not living in silos of battling, but connection, a bridge building of really, obviously why you need a bridge is because you're not in the same place, right? There's a gap.
Right.
So that's why you need a bridge. And bridge building is very, very important.
Because the bridge helps you to go back and forth, right? So the bridge is just one way. It helps you to go back and forth. Without the bridge, there's a gap, you fall inside and you drown. But the bridge helps you to have that type of give and take, to learn about the other, to learn about how you can relate better to the other, to learn about how you can try to support the other to relate better to you. And ultimately, if we have that pattern of communication that is open-minded so that we can bridge our differences, I'm not saying that we all have to think the same way or even believe in the same things. We have to be able to tolerate. We have to be able to respect. We have to be able to give space to everybody to exist.
And one of the other big things that we work on with different communities is that we could say we're going to have to agree to disagree on these core points. And here are 2 or 3 points where we absolutely agree and we could work together. Like, for example, in Europe, we work very closely with the Muslim community on kosher slaughtering, because 80% of kosher food is purchased by people within the Muslim community for halal, which is very similar to kosher. And so where there's kosher slaughtering is banned, it becomes very problematic for the Muslim community. And also issues of discrimination that happening in Europe is impacting both of us the same, even though there may be fundamental differences on other points. So when you just completely alienate the other side, you could lose core critical allies in what you're fighting for in those areas. Similar with the Christian community, a lot of Christian communities are under attack within the Middle East, in certain where Islamic extremism is prevalent. I'm not talking about moderate, Islam. We're talking about extremists where they're controlling the reality, and it becomes very difficult for Christian groups. And so we could be supportive and allies in that area. And once you start realizing that we need to be working together for things that are much more important, then that starts bridging things. And this is what's really important.
And we see that, to bring it back to psychology, we see that when organizations, for example, have shared goals, even if it's just a few shared goals, it moves the organization forward because it provides for an opportunity for synergistic communication within the organization where everybody feels an ownership, whether it's to growth of the organization, better serve the stakeholders, whatever it may be. I think if we take that from the mezzo level, the organization, to the macro level of the society, what you say make a lot of sense. We don't have to agree on everything, but if we have a few points that we agree on, it gives us an opportunity to collaborate, move forward.
And that's a great way to end this third podcast episode. And this is what we're really trying to do, is what is the point of agreement that will help society move forward, and to focus much more on that core point as opposed to what separates us without pretending that we're not separate.
Right.
And it goes back to that, what's going to be productive on a macro level versus what's positive. It's like, how can we be productive amidst the disagreements? Orly, thank you so much for being on my podcast. This has been 3 thrilling episodes, and I think our listeners will really enjoy this. And as I mentioned before, we're really trying to make a greater impact. If you find this inspiring and interesting, please forward it to your network. Thank you for listening in on Habits of a Whole Heart. I am Arnie Herz, your host, as part of the Humanity Matters series on hmTV. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.